So today I have Fotis Dimeas at my podcast guest, and yeah, I'm really happy to have you here, and would like to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. Who are you, and what are you doing?
Great to be here, Elir. So, this Fotis. I'm currently the CEO and co-founder of Progressive Robotics. I started as a mechanical engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I always remember myself as a practical guy
Mm.
since a small child. I believe I still am a practical guy. That's why I followed the engineering path. My father is an engineer,
Mm-hmm.
but the rest of my family is mostly. I grew up in a small village in Greece. And my grandparents were farmers, but at some point I thought that the engineering path is for me. So I
Mm.
finished the engineering school, and somehow I found myself doing a PhD in human-robot collaboration.
Mm.
I thought this way I could make an impact with robots in the world, do
When was
something
that?
new.
When was that? Sorry.
Sorry?
What year are we talking about here?
Oh, I started my PhD in 2012.
Mm.
I finished in 4 or 5 years, took me 4 or 5 years. Uh, I don't like theory, but somehow I managed to complete the PhD without getting in too much theory, do as much practical things as possible,
Mm.
make humans and robots collaborate, share workspace, and do something together.
Mm.
So at least this was the idea.
Mm.
And when I finished my PhD, I worked a fair amount of time on as a researcher at the
Mm-hmm.
university, where I work with a lot of people doing research in robotics and cobots in general, following what I started in a PhD. And at some point, I said that, am I actually doing an impact as I imagined?
Mm.
And so this took some time to answer. It took some time to answer this question. And
Wait. I think I would like to make a pause here, um, because there's some certain steps in between that seem for you very very natural. But if you reflect on that, and if you're taking us within back to the journey or to the points back in time, we might discover some, let's say, yeah, some important lessons to learn. Because when you said that your father was an engineer, and you were talking a little bit about the background, is that something that was part of your daily upbringing? So was that something that came, because sometimes comes naturally to me means actually I have been introduced to something very early on, right? So sometimes it is the way it is, as you said. There is some character traits or some things that are within our genes, but sometimes it is you have been introduced to a certain topic or to certain techniques or way of thinking very early on. So people tend to say, this was easy for me, but sometimes you had father, mother, brother, cousin, whoever it was, that introduced a certain way of thinking very early on, and having a engineer as a father that might could have contributed to that. So how were you one of those kids that was disassembling radios and putting together some things? Maybe you can
exactly,
can
exactly.
go back in time here.
I was that curious kid that was interesting to find out how things were working. So I was taking things apart. And as you said, definitely when kids grow up, they usually like to follow parents' paths. They take a lot of lessons, life lessons from their parents. I have two kids right now, very small, 1 and 3 years old. So I see myself how I try to pass some lessons to them,
Hmm.
life in general, not become an engineer or become an entrepreneur or something like that. But it definitely the 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 parents' way of life has an impact on the kids and the future that they might choose in their life in their career. Of course, I had no contact with entrepreneurship until I was, let's say, 25 years old. I didn't know what this word was, what did it mean. So I found out about it the hard way, let's say.
Mm.
And I think I did it out of necessity. There was something while I was doing research and working on the university. I always thought I like to see to fix things. I like to see make things work and see them operating. Though this gives me the satisfaction I need. But I spent a fair amount of time in academia. It was a great time. I learned a lot of things, but I wasn't getting this satisfaction that I was craving for.
And
And
would
in the back of my head was always, this has to go out in the world somehow.
so out of this academia bubble.
Exactly, exactly. And what are the ways to go get outside the bubble? So either someone from the industry comes to you and you work together. So you, as within the academia, work together with the industry to fix some real world problems. But I found out that it was the other way around actually. And at some at some point, I was finding myself working on the solution and then trying to find what is the problem to apply the solution, which is ridiculous.
But
But
a very common misunderstanding of the concept, especially, I mean, because research is research, and a lot of research is driven by the industry, because today in today's time, especially, and especially in Germany, the majority of funding of those PhD positions, but also about some labs, is partially funded by the industry, right? So a lot of research is going into the topics that are interesting for the industry. But as you said, very often you find yourself as as a scientist developing some technology, being interested in the technology, and then having something that you might can think of that might be a solution, but actually yeah, then as you said, doing it the other way around, having a solution, then trying to find the right fitting problem with it.
particularly when you are in engineering and you're doing practical stuff, if you are into life science or more theoretical stuff, it's perfectly fine to do this. I mean, I remember when Hamilton was discovering the quaternions, there wasn't any practical use, but 100 years later, and there you go. But when you're doing engineering and when you're doing robotics, the solutions need to be driven by the problem. They need to be driven by the industry. You have to solve actual problems which are out there. And this is, at some point, we decided to go outside the lab and try to talk to people, try to talk to industries, try to talk to system integrators, how robots are currently being programmed, what are the problems of factories, and how we could apply our research, because we were working on human-robot collaboration, motion planning, robot control, and some robot learning as well, how we can apply them to the actual world. So still, we're trying to find problems to apply our solutions.
Hmm.
And this is where we hit the wall.
And do you mind trying to remember the time where you're realizing that, and even in the maybe early beginnings of your academia lifetime, how big or existing, let's ask this way, was any teaching, any knowledge sharing about entrepreneurship? Because nowadays there's a lot of spin-offs coming out of university, so there's a lot of initiatives to close that gap. But how is that for you?
I really believe on the role of an ecosystem around the university within the city that makes events and invites people to join and listen. And here's some success or some failure stories. Failure stories are also very helpful from people who have done this and they have either achieved or failed. But at the moment, I was at the, let's say, the area where as I was growing up, or the people around me, second or first or second connections, weren't that close to entrepreneurship. So I didn't get of the vibes. I mean, I was seeing around over here and there some invitations or some events. I didn't really understand what these events were. Nobody told me.
Hmm.
And sometimes I I asked myself, okay, where do people, if someone wants to do something, let's say a company, startup, and put this, make a business out of it, where do they start? So the only thing I knew what to do is read. So I started reading books, and then I started following some social media channels, some people who did this in the past, and then I started talking to people who did this. And when you start talk to people, this is a life-changing moment. And at some point, this is when we decided that we need to start a company.
You were talking about impact earlier on and leaving the academia bubble to have the opportunity to do more impact. And now that you've been through academia and you know what kind of struggles scientists, researchers are having with entering that kind of entrepreneurial world, are you sharing something of this? I mean, this podcast is one of the episodes or one of the opportunities, but are you still connected with the university you studied at, and are you taking part of this kind of events that you were talking earlier about?
I try to do my best to connect with people who are in the academia and are, let's say, lost souls like I was when I was in the academia, trying to find my way out in the entrepreneurship world. And when I am invited to some events to share my stories, this is, I want to do it in a more graphic way. And sometimes when people ask me, what would I do differently if I went back in time? My answer is always, I would start it earlier.
You mean with the entrepreneurial way?
Yeah, exactly.
But do you remember, because you said that you were hitting a wall, or not only you, but maybe you and some other people were hitting a wall. Can you describe the moment and the next steps when it came to you, maybe throughout your research, that it would be necessary to actually build a company?
I remember I have two stories for you.
Yeah.
When we initially started going, trying to talk to people, to factories, go outside the bubble and try to understand their problems. The idea is, let's say we have a really nice technology about human-robot collaboration that could probably work and help a human do assembly stuff. So we went to a company that we had some nice conversations, and they show at the production line was a person who was doing assembly of electronic components, some sensors. And they told us, can you automate it? Can you put your technology here? And we said, of course, we can put a robot on the other side of the table and we can help the human on this assembly phase. And we saw some eyebrows on the people who were decision makers in the factory. The question was, are you going to double the production? Probably not, because the human is not even close to the dexterity of the robot, not even close to the dexterity of the human, so we might speed it up by 25%. So are you going to do it better, or are you going to do it cheaper? Because it's not going to get cheaper, because still have to pay a human, but on top of that I still have to pay for a robot. So this was
And
the
the
first,
integration.
and the integration. So this was the real eye opener for us about human robot collaboration. Okay, it has some, of course, it has some application, but in small and medium sized factories, nobody really cares putting a robot next to a human. So this is the truth. So
But
then they thought, okay, why don't we just use our technology about teaching by demonstration and put a human on the beginning, or help integration or help speed up the teaching, and then put the human out of the equation. So then we started working on some versatile packaging applications where we were teaching a trajectory. We're grabbing the robot, a collaborative robot arm. We're teaching a trajectory, 1 or 2 repetitions, and the robot has the technology to understand and encode and try to generalize in different situations using 3D cameras, perception, all these fancy keywords. And then we did a lab prototype. Actually, this lab prototype gave us the first funding as a company, but we can talk about it later. And we went to factories in end-of-line automation to packaging. We showed this, and they told us, okay, if this would work 20 times faster, cycle time was 20 times lower, maybe it makes sense. So this wasn't possible at all. And both of these cases happened because we were trying to find a problem to apply our solution. So this happened at some point. We did a pivot, and we tried. This was a real eye opener. Say we have to do it the other way around. So we need to talk to more people, try to understand what were the real problems, what are the real pains they had, and make something useful for them.
You said something at so one of the last few sentences, talking to people. So this is very important, right? Because especially, and I would like to get your opinion about this. The human robot collaboration was a hype word for many years. Universal Robots started this hype, I would say so. And but people realized not very soon, but after a while, that this collaboration part is actually not very easy to achieve, especially if you are on the line, because in a lab you're working with things and you think, that works pretty good, this demo works pretty good, but you have no idea about all the regulations that are necessary. So you have no experience about the guy that works on the end of line that has been there for 25 years and know this 47 requirements that are necessary to even put that robot there, right? So does it need to have a fence? We were talking about cycle time. What kind of collaborative robot is it? And it needs to be put on the line, right? So now comes the integrator part, because when you buy a UR and you're starting in this kind of industry or in this kind of applications building, then you think, the robot costs 20, 25, maybe even less if you get a good deal. But you don't actually know about what an integrator is and and that it is necessary. And you think, there's a few cables and people should be able to do it. Nope. So to the 25K comes 50K just for the integrator, right? So then the very cheap solution that you could put into the line actually becomes very expensive. And as you said earlier, when talking about cycle times, ROI is still a big topic, right? So what were your next step when you said, actually, okay, let's do it the other way around? How is that communicated within the team? How is this revelation for you coming? So yeah, how is that for you?
So when we decided to start the company, we took a leap of faith, and with this lab prototype about versatile packaging with 3D cameras and cobots and teaching by demonstration, we started with that. So we took a funding with that. We took a small pre-seed ticket. So we resigned from the university. We started the company. So we started with 5 people. 5 people from the lab who were actually committed, who had the same mindset as me, and we decided to do something meaningful out of it. And we were experimenting. We were experimenting with packaging, with welding applications, with all kinds of stuff here, with assembly, whatever comes to mind. So we, at least for 5 or 6 months, we were experimenting. We talked to more than 100 factories and system integrators during that.
This is a nice number. This is a nice number, because very often I talk to people and they said, we talked to 15 people. I said, what do you mean 15? Yeah, 15 people, 20 people. So now we're talking numbers, 100 people that you can actually idea how this world works, right? So
I
great,
still
great.
believe that this number is still small. I
Yeah.
always like to talk to people. I always like to find myself in situations asking about their daily operations. What would you change? What would you do differently? What is your biggest pain? I don't ask them what do you want because nobody knows what they want. But I'm trying to infer what the problems, what makes their life difficult. But also I like to find out what makes them get up every morning and go to the workplace, what makes them happy. So I want to try to find a balance and not do something that makes them miserable, let's say. So I'm
I-
still talking to people, and we talked at least 100 factory owners, frontline workers, production line managers, and of course system integrators, because these are, at the end of the day, these are the people who are currently doing installation of robots in factories and warehouses. So what was really striking to us is that the way robots are being programmed even now in handling applications, pick and place applications, is the same way that robots were programmed 40 years ago.
hmm,
So you grab the teaching pendant, you move the robot manually to point A, you save the position. Then you go to point B, you save the position. And then you stitch with linear or circular paths. And this takes a lot of time. If you have, let's say, one program for the robot, let's say single pick and place dash, it makes total sense. But we went into applications where they needed to put 20, 30, 50 different programs on the robot because they have different product variations. And the system integrators were spending weeks or even months to do this program manually.
hmm.
And then we asked them, why are you doing this way? Have you tried looking for alternative methods, software? I mean, if each robot manufacturer has a software, a simulation software that can do this offline and speed things up. Some people did, but it turns out this software was very, very difficult to use. All the software is very, so we also talked to robot manufacturers, and somehow we make them to tell us that yes, we are good at hardware, but our software is our weak point.
Hmm.
So this is where where the revelation came, that we need to make things more easy to use and more versatile, more flexible. And we need to focus. We need to find an application that is everywhere. It's a good start, and it's a good starting point for other applications in the future. But also, when you introduce new technologies, some people are afraid of new technologies, so you have to give them something that is also familiar. And what is familiar is everywhere and can be a base for any other application. It's actually palletizing.
Hmm.
It's an application that is every production line, the products are being stacked into pallets. And it's a big market. So we decided to start from palletizing. Of course, it's a crowded space, but we found some unique selling points, and we found our first customers. We sold our first software to make palletizing versatile. So the idea is to bring value to the system integrator, reduce the deployment time by 80%, but also bring value to the production line worker. Give them the ability to use the robot without any training. So they can enter new recipes, new programs to the robot for palletizing in less than a minute. And this is currently the program we have on the product we have on the market. We have done our first installations. We have some happy customers who are returning and ask for more. So
You
when
found
they
product market fit.
it's still too early to say that, but when the first customer came back and asked for the second one, this was a, this was a reason to open a champagne at the office.
Hmm. Let me ask a few questions I have here. So you were mentioning programming has been or is still be done sometimes the way it has been like 40 years ago. And you said also that hardware producers are not very good. They admitted they are not very good at software, right? And what I heard is that a lot of startups in that space, especially in the last 5 or 10 years, saw that uh, sorry, saw that pain and But one of the reasons why this is because of the architecture of the robot, right? So very often you have existing you have robots that are in some lines for many years, and you're building on top of each other. So you're building on an architecture that has been built with software where software was not advanced as it is today, right? So instead of wiping everything clean and coming up with a new stack and new UI UX that has a good connection with the back end, right? It's not very easy because they need to have this balance because they have existing customers with existing robots that are working totally differently. So now they're trying to do the impossible with the old stack and with the old architecture, coming up with new technology that can somehow build on top of each other. So now you can satisfy both, right? Offering new UI UX, but still being able and compliant with existing robots and systems. And I think this is one of the reasons why it's so hard. So for a new company that starts with new robots, it's much easier because they can introduce and make usage of all the problems that had been revealed as being problems in the past, now doing it differently. But my question here is, um, you were talking about value, and when it is a buzzword, right? But it is also a keyword because without value, people would most likely not buy it. And you said that you were able to come up with a new programming idea that will give the operator the capability of programming it within, you said, I think 30 seconds or under a minute,
Mhm.
but also making deployment time, which is a huge topic, right? For the system integrator, right? He has a big portfolio. The customer is talking with him, and he looks in his portfolio, what kind of solutions can I apply at this problem here? And you, as a new company, would like to get into that portfolio and show the system integrator, this is what what my product is doing, what my service is doing. So how is this kind of conversation for you, and how were you able to manage? Because the relationship between integrator and customer and you guys, it's a very complicated one. So maybe you can tell me a little bit about this and yeah,
It's a
exploring
complicated,
this
exactly, it's a
question.
complicated balance, and it took us some time, and we're still working on it. Uh, where exactly to go? Do you go directly to the end customer? Do you go directly to the integrator? What's important is that the end customer wants to talk to one person.
Hmm.
This is it. So you start from there. So they either talk to you or they talk to the integrator. They
Mm.
can talk to both. So one comment to what you said before about the architecture. Currently, our software is robot agnostic, so it can work with different robot brands, different robot models, from cobots to industrial robot arms. And industrial robot arms are very important because they were neglected, and they still are. Integrators, the majority of the robots currently being installed are big industrial robot arms. And the way they are, the user interface of the robot with the user, with the human, is not the teaching pendant. Teaching pendant is used only for programming. Is the traditional, the 50-year-old SCADA, or what it's the PLC, the industrial computer that connects the robot to the human. So people are familiar with that, so they love this PLC. So one thing is how to make the robots hardware agnostic and also make it talk to the PLC at the same time. And what integrators are looking, and what made us apart, is the word customization. Give them the ability to customize it the way they want, and give them the ability to have, let's say, one robot, two robots, three pallet stations, five conveyors, a very ridiculous way of operating a gripper. So they have this portfolio. They need to put some smart software and give the ability to also stand out as a solution to the end customers. And we have seen that nowadays, what sells robots is not the robot itself, is the software that accompanies the robot. But if I go back to the university, when we were doing research projects, we were collaborating with different research groups, different industries, different factories, and within each project, every time we were working with different robots. So by necessity, we had built the architecture to become robot agnostic without even knowing that this would help us in the future. So 10 years fast forward, we focus on industrial robots because we see that they are neglected, that there's a big market and there's a big demand there for smart software. So the software itself, it's just a web application that it has a very slick user experience. So it's like using a smartphone. The first time you see it, you know what to do. And on the back, under the hood, we have all this robotic technology about collision-free motion planning and applying trajectories, generating trajectories that are 20% faster compared to what a human would do traditionally with a teaching pendant. So we also make the robot more efficient and the production line runs faster. And this on top of that, when you go to more advanced applications, for example, when you go to depalletizing applications, or when you go to mixed case palletizing applications, this is where you can add computer vision. This is where you need 3D perception. This is where you need decision making, that sometimes the application is so chaotic, so you cannot use equations, and when you don't have equations, the only way to solve the problem is with machine learning. And this is, let's say, the focus of what we're doing right now, and looking for the next applications that we will put into the market soon.
I like two things. One thing is that you said you're focusing on one application first, because it seems so simple, right? But our software can do a lot of things, right? But that means in the ear of the customer, I don't know what you're talking about because I have no box where I can put you into. So, and specializing on one application, making one application work, and especially if you were looking for one where you can add on and build upon on, it's always a good idea. So for all founders, and this seems like a pattern. Focusing on one topic first makes things easier because you have limited resources, you have limited money, you have limited time. So making one thing work good versus three things making is always a good option, right?
It's also one of the most difficult part of the startup world when you are young and when you have distractions everywhere. You can't do many things at a time. You have to focus and you have to really believe in what you are doing.
The other thing was that you guys realized something throughout the research and trying to fix or solve real life problems. My question here would be, because the agnostic part, I have almost 50 episodes now, and I think I'll talk to at least three people that use that word in different kind of contexts though. And I was working for a computer vision company, software company that was trying to come up with a solution that is also agnostic. The problem that you have here is, at least in my experience, the theory is good and workable, but reality shows you that you're on one side of the API. There is always the other side of the API that you maybe not getting full access to, where you don't get any support, where you don't understand the logic sometimes, right? So the agnostic part is a good idea and good aim, but reality shows that actually it's very hard. So it is actually very hard because every single robot by nature or by historical reasons is very different sometimes. So you might be able to operate the robot in its basics functions, but when it comes to the details, it can be very different, even sometimes from model to model, right? This is if they're doing a good job. This is not very often the case, but to really being able to use the full potential of a robot and being able to control it in all the things that a robot can do, then the agnostic part, especially for a startup that especially comes out of academia and doesn't have that knowledge about industrial robots, is actually very, very hard. I've seen this in the past very, very time.
It's
How is
very
that for
hard,
you?
and you never know when there will be a software update that breaks everything, even in the same model. So I remember that very well. When we tried to do our first robot installation along with a system integrator, we spent a couple of months trying to make our software compatible with this robot. So it's a top robot brand, and it makes sense like business-wise to work with this robot because everyone has this brand. So we programmed everything. It seemed to be working at the integrator's facility where we had the setup, the cell setup, and then everything was dismantled and was reset at the factory. And when we went to the factory, even though it was the same setup, actually, we have worked with it, it didn't work because you face the reality over there. You face, let's say, the products that come out of the oven, and the stretch film gets, let's say, is not as you expect. So what we did is we spent a week. The entire team spent a week in the factory, in the production line, with our laptops, and we rewrote the driver for this robot.
Hmm.
So now we're using the driver that we wrote in the factory, and there can be a trap for startups claiming to be hardware agnostic or targeting to become hardware agnostic. You cannot support all robots. So let's face this.
Hmm.
So you cannot support. You have to make choices. And this is where distractions come, because one client might come to you and say, okay, I have this client who has this robot that you have never heard before, and they want 5 installations. So do you do it or not? And you need to have the capacity to say no.
Hmm.
Sure, you need the mental capacity to say no to a customer because we're still on the learning phase. We have a lot of things to learn. But of course, you need to have the financial capacity to say no to a job because it will distract you from the actual purpose. Otherwise, you still have to spend a couple of months to make the driver for this kind of robot that just came out.
So how were you able to manage that? So I'm very curious about this. So customization is a big topic, right? Every single customer is telling you because you have been in the lab and you tried different things and you can say more or less confident, actually this works with different kind of product, right? But the customer is always, no, no, no. My line looks totally different and very unique, and my products look very different from all the products that you have been testing. So, right. So this is the mindset they have. And then they're asking for this kind of customization. I would like to have this and this and this and that and this. So how do you and you said something very important, the word no, right? And if you're a startup, you would like to sell units. Even if you're funded with VC, if you're VC funded or not, you would like to sell units to earn money to continue your journey. So how do you say no, and how do you make the decision to say, actually, this carrot that either the end customer or the system integrators is holding in front of you, there are 5 lines. You can sell 5 units or whatever, right? And or 5 licenses if it's software. So how do you manage to say no and say no? Actually, I need to fix some things first, and then I can come back to you. Or I will say no to this kind of customization because there's no volume for me, right? But is it a strategic yes, I do? Is it a strategic no, I do? So how do you was that by trial and error? Did you had someone who was teaching you that, who had this kind of experience, that this kind of journey is very, very common, or did you read books? How was that for you?
Of course, I read books, but you have to learn from the best. So we have the luck. Some of our investors, who are angel investors, are also our strategic, say, advisors, and they have done what we're doing in the past. And one of the best, let's say, advice I have received from them is that start doing things that don't scale. It's perfectly fine to do things that don't scale. So it's perfectly fine to, let's say, create a product just for this, customized just for this single customer. As long as you believe that this program in the future can, with some engineering hours, it can be scalable. And this is what we started doing. We made things that didn't scale, and but we knew that, okay, if we spend this X amount of time working on this feature, what took us 1 week, it can be easily transferred to the person, let's say the engineer, the integrator, without requiring too much knowledge, or even to the person on the factory floor. And so this is, I think this is the biggest part. And when you have distractions, at some point you have to say no, but it all comes, let's say, what's your runway? What do you, how have you promised to the investors? And but at the end of the day, you have to trust your gut and talk to people. Try to understand which customer, let's say, is your ideal customer, or which customer will be your evangelist, and which customer is really, really burning for a solution. Because if they're burning and their head is on fire, and you have a solution that is a brick, which our first version of our software was a brick, they will take the brick and they will put it on their head to solve their problems. So we want to make this brick round, we want to make it softer, so this is what we're working on right now. Try to find your ideal customer who is who believes in you and who is okay to wait a little bit so that you can provide an actual solution to them that is not a pointy brick that eventually will help them take off the fire in their hands.
Sorry. What I want to say is you used the word evangelist, and here I'm talking about not customers, but partners, right? Somebody who is really forgiving, but also understanding how a startup works and how new technology and innovation works. So this is definitely some learning that people can take out of this conversation as well, right? Finding someone who believes in you, because you will mess up very often. But actually, I think I like your second point as well, having a real problem, like a big burning problem, because otherwise you are the startup, you're sitting on fire, you're 5 guys, 10 guys, or people, and then on the other side, they have different things on their production line going on anyways. There's money-making problems, there's money-making things going on, and then this might be just a small innovation that could save a few percentage here and there, so they don't make a huge impact on the customer. So that means the urgency is not there. You have meetings, you have those weekly meetings, and then, oh, sorry, we didn't have time for that to test it this week, or to install it this week, or to do some samples this week, and you said, all right, then let's come back another week, and then you find yourself 6 weeks later and nothing happened, right? I had customers that were doing nothing for 8 months. So, and as a startup, as you said, your resources are limited, your money is limited, and your time is limited. And here you need to find those urgency within customers. You were talking about burning heads, right? So this is definitely two learnings that I see over and over again, and people should try to keep that in mind, right, when talking to customers slash partners.
And also when you are talking about partners and finding the correct people who believe in you, it's not just the customers and let's say the people who will use the software or will sell the software. It's also if you have investments, also the investors. Try to find people who who understand what is the pain of working with hardware, what's the pain working B2B, and how long does it take, how many no's you will get, and how many obstacles you will find in your way. So it's really important to find the correct people to partner with in this aspect.
Mm. The the product development is also very one of the topics that I'm very interested in. And here, you were saying a lot of good things, right? Talking to a lot of customers early on, involving them, finding the right ones. So, how close is the product development team, especially in my experience? Machine learning engineers sometimes are very detached from the actually application and solution. And some of the machine learning engineers never been to a factory, never been to a shop floor. So how do you ensure that the learnings and the questions that need to be asked find their way to the machine learning engineers who are building the solution? How do you bring those two worlds together? How is that for you guys?
The answer is still what I said before. Do things that don't scale, not just product wise, but bring the entire team to the factory. So we're a small team, we're 7 people right now, we're growing
Hmm.
actually, but at this level right now, every person on the team is connected to the customer. So you have to put them on the front line and see what the actual problem is. Make them get out of their simulated world they are working usually.
Hmm.
And this is the biggest lessons we have received as a startup is by going to the production floor and doing commissioning of robots in the production floor. The the amount of information you get from there simply by watching, and very importantly by talking to the people who are inside the production, the frontline workers, you get huge amount of information about the actual problems. So you start from by solving one problem and you see 10 other problems. And if you see these problems elsewhere, then you have something that you can work on as a next step. So of
Love this
course,
advice.
I'm certain that if we grow to a number that it's not feasible to bring everyone to the factory floor, we have to do it anyway in, let's say, smaller groups.
Hmm. As we're coming towards to the end of the podcast, I always would like to give you, my guest, the opportunity to talk about what are the things that you're doing now at the moment with the company with Progressive Robotics, but also what's what's coming towards you. So what are your plans? We talked a bit earlier, so I know a few things, but maybe you can give us a little sneak peek or some insights you would like to
Yeah.
share.
So we are really happy to announce that we just received a seed funding of 1.5 million from Marathon Venture Capital. So these are some really good partners that we are happy to have on the team, along with the existing investors. And currently, we want to scale our single case palletizing product. And we are also working because R&D is in our DNA after spending so many years on the academic world. So we're also doing some new projects that involve a lot of AI and machine learning along with machine computer vision for some really cool applications in the logistics sector
Hmm.
because this is a really, really growing sector that we see. And we're currently in hiring mode. So we're hiring robotic engineers, machine learning people, business development, also backend development. So I'm open to receiving CVs at the moment.
That sounds great. I mean, if I think we can say this very easily. So this episode will be published on the day you will announce this funding and or closing of the funding. So I will ensure that some of the job applications that you are sending out there or that you're pushing out there, the positions that you're hiring for will find its way into the advertisement for this episode. I'm very happy that you said yes. And what I really like is that. you were able to tell it very naturally that even though you have this very deep academia path in your CV, the entrepreneurial questions and discovery and exploration that you've done in the past few years are very elementary. So I think everyone who would like to become a founder, everyone who is playing around with the idea, I think can learn a lot from this conversation. And this is my aim with those conversations that I'm having. And is there something that you said that you would say, and this is maybe like a phrase, but something that you would teach yourself, your younger self, like if you could have the opportunity to talk to a younger Fotis, and giving this like little nugget that could be helping him on the long way, what would that be?
Yeah, get out of your bubble and talk to more people. Go to more events, get out of your comfort zone, and try to understand what will actually make an impact if you are interested in that. And regarding the entrepreneurship, it can be learned. The only requirement is that you have a small fire burning inside you that you need to do more and you want to put it out in the real world. This is the only requirement. Everything else can be learned.
Yeah, I mean the fire. I think if it can be translated to is always having the perseverance, right? Keeping the fire alive, because there will be a lot of things that trying to blow out
This is the
the
next
fire.
step. You have to have the resilience to keep it alive.
Yeah, true.
Because the startup is about creating, so you have to. But if you have this fire inside you and you decide to start, it's definitely going to stay alive. It's a tough job,
Hmm.
but the only if I went back, I don't know if you ask me in 20 years, but currently I would try to do it earlier.
Hmm. I say thank you for your time and especially for giving, yeah, or taking us with your within your journey and the way of thinking and the way of learning. I think this is very applicable. Everyone, I think it was laid out like a good blueprint for some future entrepreneurs. And I'm looking forward to see more content because this is something I giving it advice, right? To founders. Just yesterday, I've been to Zurich and talked to some young founders as well. And here it was also, yeah, the technology is very edgy, and I don't want to share too much because of competition. But it doesn't need to be showing the product in detail, right? It doesn't need to be showing the IP. It needs to be showing that you guys are burning for the product. It needs to be showing that you are working on real life application. It needs to show the real life applications because customers sometimes the imagination they have is very limited, right? So it needs to be visual. It needs to be applicable. And here, if I can give some advice here on my from my side, being in the social media game for quite a few years now, actually, showing this and presenting your company, I think this can definitely help, not only necessarily for inbounds, but making people understand, right? The technology industry that we are in is sometimes very far away from people, and making them understanding how this technology actually works can help with expectation management. So this is from my side.
Great advice, also.
Thank you for your time, and looking forward to publishing this and see what will the outcome of your announcement. And yeah, let's talk later on again.
Great.
Take care and wish you a nice weekend.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.